What's a harsh truth about being a man that no one warned you about? Subscribe for more. I was talking to my brother the other day and he said something that really stuck with me. As a guy, you either figure things out yourself or you don't. No one's coming to help. That hit me hard. As a woman, I've always had people check in on me when I'm struggling. But he made it sound like, for men, struggling in silence is just expected. It made me realize there are probably a lot of things men go through that women just don't notice or fully understand. So I'm curious, what's something about being a man that caught you off guard? Something you wish you had been warned about? I feel like society talks a lot about the struggles women face, but I don't hear men's perspectives as often. Would love to hear your thoughts. Story 1. People seem to hate weak men more than bad men. It's deeply ingrained. Society views men as strong and advantaged, yet fails to acknowledge those who don't fit that mold. Men who don't measure up simply get discarded, deemed invisible rather than recognized as real men. It's frustrating to hear negative traits described as inherent to masculinity, when in reality, the problem isn't that men are inherently bad. It's that bad behavior gets men noticed, while being non-confrontational or genuinely kind often leads to being overlooked. Interestingly, I don't see as many outright terrible men as I hear about from people who seem to carry a chip on their shoulder. In many ways, it's no surprise that certain men gravitate toward the right wing. At least there, they are immediately recognized as men and given attention, even if it's negative. Take liberal versus conservative men as an example. Who dominates discourse? Who do liberal women talk about more? It seems like conservative men live rent-free in their heads, while liberal men are barely acknowledged. It often feels like men are expected to be the enemy rather than potential allies. Story 2. There's a well-known video where a woman asks, "Who do you go to when you're at your lowest?" The responses from men are heartbreaking. Things like, "No one. I'm a man. No one cares." Or, "Wait, you mean you all actually have someone?" For me, I do have a sibling I can reach out to, and we check up on each other. But beyond that, when I was going through my divorce, 2 women noticed what was happening and reached out to check on me. It meant something at the time. But now, if I don't reach out first, I never hear from them. So I stopped. Someone replied, "I have a friend who recently fell and mildly hurt herself and had people running across the street to help." When I was in a similar situation a couple years back and nearly unconscious on the sidewalk, I had people casually step over my body. Not a single person checked to see if I was okay, even as I was dragging myself to the curbside out of the way so I didn't get stepped on. I wonder what the difference might be. Story 3. If you're struggling and can't keep a lid on your anxiety, people don't see someone who needs support. They see a man who's scary, dangerous, someone to be avoided or even locked up. So I let people see my joy, my humor. But when I feel anything negative, I shut down. I become detached, flat, dead. Better to be invisible than to be seen the wrong way. Help is not coming. Story 4. No one gives a fuck about you or your needs. Just get used to understanding that you are in it alone, even in a relationship. Someone replied, "It saddens me to see so many guys living this experience. Most of the marriages I saw growing up were more or less healthy, and I learned that emotional support went both ways. Do y'all really feel like your wives, partners don't care about you?" Someone else followed up, "I think for most women, there's just a fundamental psychological inability to really care about men. Probably something to do with the insanely strong narrative we're all taught growing up about real men and how men are strong and stoic and solitary, etc., etc. Women internalize the shit out of that. Men do too, but usually after a while we realize that our experience of life does not at all jive with the narrative, so we understand it's bullshit. Women never experience the disconnect between the narrative and the reality. So I think deep down the vast majority of women think, he's a man, he'll figure it out. The best of women try to fight against this prejudice, but it's still there, and you see it pop up whenever a man shows vulnerability. And here's a fun thing for any men reading this and nodding along. We probably have some similar prejudices about women that we also don't even realize. Chew on that and try to have some grace when you interact with women. Story 5. It's better to smile and move on instead of moping around. because you won't ever tell anyone how you feel. When I heard that, I thought, no, I'm going to be expressive. Then I saw what happens when you open up to the wrong people, how they don't react the way you need them to, and it's chilling. So I stopped speaking out, except to one person, my homie. But mostly it's just lone battles. Story 6, in relationships, everything that's visible is expected to be equal, but beneath the surface, it never is. You will never receive the same emotional support you are expected to give. You will never have the permission to break down like your wife does. You are always expected to be the rock. You listen to her vent, but you do not vent. Her emotional struggles are real and understandable. Yours are a sign of weakness or a nuisance. Story 7. The police will literally laugh at you when you call them over a domestic dispute. You're taller and stronger, they point out, like that changes anything. But that's exactly why I called. Because I don't want to injure her in self-defense. Because I don't want her to keep punching me. Maybe just do your job. Story 8. Men are lucky if they have one friend who checks in on them unprompted. Luckier still if that friend can be trusted, with their confidence, their thoughts, their emotions. The key is unprompted. Most men think they have strong friendships, but who always initiates contact? Try not reaching out for a few months. See who calls first. Most won't, and the ones who don't, they probably aren't thinking about you. They probably don't care whether you exist or not. And here's another truth. The drive for relationships is often biological. If that drive ever fades, due to illness, age, or something else, you might find yourself looking at the person next to you and asking, why are we here? Story 9. Everything you do can be considered creepy. Alone in a park while kids play nearby? Creepy. Browsing the women's section without a woman by your side? Creepy. Eating alone in your car? Creepy. It doesn't matter if you're minding your own business. The wrong place, the wrong time, the wrong context. Suddenly you're a threat. And the list goes on. Story 10. Misandry is everywhere, but no one thinks it's a problem worth addressing. In my mixed-gender friend groups, when a man does something dumb or bad, you hear it, men. If I mess up, it's directed at me. Sometimes it's contempt, sometimes it's a joke, but it's never funny. I'm expected to care deeply about misogyny, and I do. But when I call out the casual sexism thrown at men, I'm the one being sensitive. This is how young boys get radicalized. They see the double standard, the quiet contempt, and they say, screw you too. That's not an excuse, just a reality. One harsh truth feeding another. Someone replied, some men struggle with inclusivity because they've rarely experienced it. To be a good feminist, you're expected to passively accept and internalize misandry. Because women have been treated poorly by some men. But your feelings about those comments, never valid. In fact, most of your feelings are never really validated. Then people wonder why men are afraid to open up or don't know how to offer emotional support. We don't experience it, so we struggle to give it. And often, misandry is vented around safe men, not the ones who actually cause the damage. The attractive ones get a pass, the red flags become flags, and the cycle repeats. Men are told to rid themselves of toxic masculinity, but women haven't done the work to recognize how their own attraction is still influenced by it. So the isolated men stay alone, while the problematic ones keep getting dates and relationships. Story 11. Nobody gives a shit about you, get used to it. In the dating world, men often get attached to women quickly. Why? Because it's rare to receive genuine interest from a woman without having to move heaven and earth just to get a simple yes or no and have a real conversation. It's only when you've truly accomplished something, like landing a great job or having a loving family, that people start paying attention and you begin to matter. 99 out of 100 times, it's fair weather friends, and if you're unlucky, that applies to relationships as well. Story 12. A lot of guys are only alive because they don't want to burden their family and friends with their death. And social media don't help either. Being able to see how happy others are living is like being in hell, but having a small window of heaven and seeing how happy it is there. Ignorance is bliss. Story 13. My mental health is terrible, and yet there's nobody I can rely on to help me with it. A decade ago, when I was seeing a therapist and I explained my frustrations with my depression and anxiety, she looked me in the eye and asked me if maybe I was just blowing things out of proportion. Like, are you serious? Story 14. Most abuse isn't physical, it's emotional and verbal, and women are masters at it. Female abusers are often normalized, joked about, and even cheered in society. It's important to educate yourself on what those types of abuse look like and never let anyone use excuses like PMS, hormones, or whatever else to justify bad behavior. You may not find support or understanding externally, but if you work on your internal strength and develop a strong sense of self-worth and boundaries, you can mitigate most of the abuse you will face. Story 15. Your social status matters. I'm not saying to be obsessed with being popular, but never let anyone ruin your reputation. It's all a man has sometimes. So try to keep it elevated as possible. That's why a lot of men say to carry yourself a certain way around others. If you like stories like these, please make sure to like and subscribe for more. If you have any opinions on these stories, let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you all enjoyed today's story time, and I hope to hear from you all soon.